So module number 6, Undecidability, part 1, Decidability and Undecidability. So to understand the terms decidability and undecidability, we need to know about recursive languages and recursively enumerable languages. So recursive language. A language L is said to be recursive if there exists a Turing machine which will accept all strings in the language and reject all strings which are not a part of the language. So a recursive language is a language which will accept all the strings which are a part of that language and it will reject the strings which are not a part of that language. So the Turing machine will halt every time and give an answer accepted or rejected for each and every string input. So whenever you will put a string input in the Turing machine will say whether that language is an accepted language or whether that language is a rejected language. So it will halt if the language is accepted. It will also halt if the language is rejected. So both the situations it will halt whether language is accepted or whether language is rejected. Such a case is called as a recursive language. So a recursive language is a language where the Turing machine will halt every time and give an answer accepted or rejected. So what is recursively enumerable language? A language L is said to be recursively enumerable language if there exists a Turing machine which will accept and therefore halt for all input strings which are in L. So what it will do? A recursively enumerable language. A language is said to be recursively enumerable if the Turing machine will halt only when the language is accepted for all input strings which are in L, but may or may not halt for all input strings which are not in L. That means that a Turing machine is said to be recursively enumerable if it will accept the string and it will halt, or it will reject the string and it will halt, or it will never halt. It will go in an infinite loop. So it is said here, but may means it may halt or it may not halt for a input string which is not a part of the language. So it will halt and reject, or it will never halt if the language is rejected. It will only halt when the language is accepted. So there are three conditions: accept the language and halt, reject the language and halt, or never halt for recursively enumerable. Whereas for recursive languages you have to accept the language and you have to also halt, or you can reject the language but you have to halt. The never halt condition does not come in recursive languages. Never halt condition only comes in recursively enumerable languages. So what is a decidable language? A language L is decidable if it is recursive language. What do you mean by recursive language? A recursive language, the Turing machine will always halt whether or not, irrespective of whether the string is accepted or rejected. For a recursive language, it is accept and halt or reject and halt. So when it is called as decidable, when it is recursive language, we say that it is a decidable language. All decidable languages are recursive languages and vice versa. So a language is decidable if it is a recursive language. Partially decidable language. A language L is partially decidable if L is recursively enumerable language. So when it is called as partially decidable, when it is recursively enumerable language, that means the Turing machine will accept the string and halt, but may or may not halt if the string for all input strings which are not in L. So it can accept the string and halt, it can reject the string and halt, or it will never halt if the string is rejected string. So for rejection there are two conditions: either you can reject and halt also, or if you do not want to halt also, it's fine, you can go in an infinite loop also in a recursively enumerable language. So partially decidable languages, a language L is partially decidable if L is a recursively enumerable language. Undecidable language. A language is undecidable if it is not decidable, means opposite of decidable. If you are not decidable, that means you are undecidable. You cannot decide. If you cannot decide, then what is said? You are undecidable person. So a language also, if it is not decidable, it is undecidable. An undecidable language may sometimes be partially decidable. When a language is partially decidable, when it is a recursively enumerable language. So undecidable language can sometimes be partially decidable also. If a language is not even partially decidable, then there exists no Turing machine for that language, and such a language is an undecidable language. When you have no Turing machine for a particular language, we say that the language is a undecidable language. When no Turing machine is possible for that language. So we will sum up the whole thing. What are recursive languages? Turing machine will halt always, whether you accept the string or whether you reject the string. Whether you accept or whether you reject, it will always halt. Recursively enumerable language, Turing machine will halt sometimes and may not halt sometimes. So recursively enumerable language, it will accept and halt, it will reject and halt, or it will never halt. So Turing machine will halt sometimes and may not halt sometimes. Decidable language. What is decidable language? The language which is a recursive language is called as a decidable language. Partially decidable language, languages which are recursively enumerable are called as partially decidable. And undecidable, there is no Turing machine for the given language. So this is the summary chart. Recursive languages, Turing machine will always halt. Recursively enumerable language, Turing machine may or may not halt. Decidable languages are recursive languages. Partially decidable languages are recursively enumerable languages, and undecidable language, no Turing machine for the language. There is no Turing machine possible for an undecidable language. So this was all about decidability and undecidability. In the next part, we will see the next part of the module.